Honestly, the story is brilliant. Have you ever heard of Operation Flagship? Because I hadn't, and it's probably the best bit of police work I've ever seen. And when do you ever get to say that? So throughout the 80s, various police departments across the country were doing these so over its covert sting operations that were mainly televised because they were TV gold. They would trick people to come and be arrested. And there's one in particular called Operation Flagship that was just brilliant. So this particular event was orchestrated in 1985 by the Metropolitan Police of Washington, D.C. I hope that's right. Their challenge was to arrest fugitives and wanted people in their area. And somebody had the genius idea of, why don't we offer them all free sports tickets? There was a really sought after game going on. I don't know the sport, but it was between the Washington Redskins and the Cincinnati Bengals. Don't know what sport that is. If you know, let me know. Some genius in the police department got the addresses of the 300 most wanted fugitives. If they knew the addresses, though, why didn't they just go and arrest them? But anyway, they sent them all an invitation from a fictitious TV company called Fist, saying, congrats, you've won 2 tickets to this really sought-after sports game. Call this number to confirm you are the person named and be at the Washington Convention Center on this date in November to claim your free tickets. 168 of the 300 addresses called the number, and the police decided to be jokers. While they were on the phone waiting, the music that was playing on hold was I Fought the Law and the Law Won. The operator they always were put through to said, hi, you're through to Marcus Cran, how can I help? Police really thought they did something here because Cran is knock backwards, and they thought that was like really fun. I guess that's police humour for you, I don't know. But also on the invitation themselves, the fictitious TV company was signed off FIST, F-I-S-T, which was the name of the department leading the arrests. Federal Investigation Strike Team, something like that. And also the name of the person giving them the tickets for free was someone called Martin Detnor. Wanted backwards. Like I said, they really thought they were doing something with these backward word names. On the day of the event, they really made a song and dance out of it. They did get a TV company there disguised as this Fist, and it was going to be broadcast on TV because this was TV gold. They had 170 police officers pretending to be other people other than police officers. They were being cheerleaders, they were being security people, admin people, mascots, general hype men. And because they were there on this specific day, I guess just to be even more crueler, they said, everybody here is also going to be winning Super Bowl tickets. So everybody was like, oh my God. People were excited. They were hyped up. They were queuing while they were all waiting in line to get checked in, to get booked. They gave everyone a lanyard, which identified them as a fugitive, but also made sure that everybody had to bring their formal ID to make sure they're arresting the right person. For the really bad people, when they got booked in, they said, congrats, you've won a cassette player. Congrats, you've won this signed baseball. And they got ushered into a room, not with everybody else. The camera crew would follow them being like, yeah, you've won. And they'd be like, yeah. As soon as they walk in that room, handcuffs behind the back. Brilliant. They look on their faces. They're like, is this part of the game? And they're like, hell yeah. And then they realise that they get arrested. For everybody else in the queue, the people that did petty crimes, they got ushered into a really big event space, and they were told they were going to be given a speech by this NFL coach. They were really hyped. They were really excited. There was like 100 and odd people in this room. The fake cheerleader, mascot police people came in. They were hyping everybody up. And as soon as we were going to welcome this NFL speaker on stage, it was actually the head honcho to the police department. And he went, hi guys, you're all going to jail. And they all cheered. And then that's when everybody just took off their mascot gears and just took out their weapons and arrested everyone. Honestly, TV gold. I want to know why police stopped doing work like this. Because honestly, people are dumb enough to turn up to these events. Brilliant bit of police work. Why stop? Honestly, there's lots of footage of this online. Go and watch it. There's also loads of other sting operations, like fake Hawaiian holidays, and there's loads. All of these sting operations ended up arresting like over 3,000 wanted people. All brilliant TV gold. You need to watch it.
1996, and this woman named Lee is driving to Chicago to visit her boyfriend, and it's a long drive. She's about halfway there. She's somewhere between Louisville and Indianapolis, and she decides she's hungry and she has to stop and get gas anyway. It's like 2:30 in the morning. So she pulls off the interstate. She sees a truck stop, fills up her tank, goes inside to get food because there's like some kind of diner inside. One of those old school kinds of diners with the counter and the grill and everything behind there, but there's booths. So Lee walks in, asks to be seated, and the waitress says, actually, we're cleaning the booths. Would you mind sitting at the bar? But I'm going to sit you down on this side because the guy on that side is creepy. Countertop bar area is not big, right? It's like 3 seats from where this man is sitting. And she doesn't really look at him because she's not trying to be rude or anything like that, but she just orders her food, kind of zones out. But it was 1996. She said we didn't have phones to distract us. So I'm just kind of sitting there, like looking at the menu, and I hear this man ask me a question. And so that was the first time I looked at him directly, and I asked him to repeat himself. And when I looked at him, I realized like his skin did not fit right. And she said, she doesn't mean to sound rude, but the best way to describe it is like if someone loses a ton of weight and they have a bunch of extra skin and it's just kind of sagging before they've had the surgery. Said it was jarring, and she didn't mean to stare or anything. The man was very thin, but just had all this extra skin. But she didn't want to be rude, so she tried to avoid eye contact. She's like, I'm sorry, what'd you say? And he's like, where are you coming from this time of night? And as he asks her this question, she realizes like he has a very strange accent. It's not quite British. It's not American. Not sure what kind of accent this is. And now she says in retrospect, it was robotic. It was like an AI voice, but at the time she had nothing to compare it to. She actually thought that he had some kind of voice box, like maybe he had had a throat surgery or something like that. She said she wasn't creeped out by this man. She just realized that he had a lot of physical problems that she just was unfamiliar with. And so she wasn't trying to be rude or anything. And she just says, oh, I'm going to visit my boyfriend. And so the waitress brings her food. As the waitress sets down the food, the man looks over and he says where the bathroom is. Like he asked the question, but out of order. The waitress points him down the hall and he gets up, and Lee said that as she watched him, it was very strange how he moved, like very abnormal. It looked like it took a lot of effort. He had a very abnormal gait. As they both watch him walk down this hallway, the waitress turns to Lee and says, there's something wrong with that man. He remembers thinking, I don't think that's a human. And she said she had to stop herself from saying it, and she doesn't know what possessed that thought to pop into her head because she's never in her life thought, I don't think that that's a person before. It's just this very inherent uncanny valley feeling that she's never had before. And so he comes back and he sits closer to her now. The waitress kind of notices that he sits closer now, and she looks at Lee and she looks at the man and she's like, well, I have some cleaning to do in the back, but I'm going to come out here and check on you guys in 5 minutes. So the waitress goes in the back, and now it's just Lee and this man alone in the truck stop. And so Lee's like, you know what? I got to finish my food anyway. May as well chat this man up. He's talking to her anyway. She's like, may as well be polite, right? And so he's asking her all kinds of questions about herself. She's answering his questions. And finally, she's like, you know, you haven't told me anything about you. I've told you a lot about myself. Like, what's your deal? And he says, no, we're just here to observe. And that struck her as strange. That's also when she realizes he's not eating or drinking anything. He's just sitting there. She gets kind of uncomfortable, and she's like, well, what do you observe? Like, who do you observe? What do you mean we're here to observe? Man kind of smiles like he's been caught or something. And he says, you know, I just do a lot of traveling. And Lee's like, what, like across universes? Because she said she's just a Sagittarius and she just felt like it because the conversation was strange anyway. And what else is she going to do at 2:30 in the morning? And he just tells her, he said, yeah, we come here for like 100 years and we change bodies as we need. He's like half amused, and she goes, yeah, your suit doesn't fit very well. Without laughing, without anything, he just says, yeah, it's new. And she goes, are you supposed to be telling me all this? And he says, well, we can see who can be trusted. This conversation goes on as she finishes her meal, and she's just amused by it, right? Kind of taking it like half joking, half serious. And the waitress comes back, she gets the check, and nothing revolutionary was said besides they're here and they watch us. Lee pays, she's getting up to leave, and she says goodbye to the man, and he says, oh, you'll see me again, but I'll be in a different suit. He says, yeah, okay, well, how will I know it's you then? And he says, well, do you have a favorite quote? The man says, if I see you again, I'll say this quote to you and you'll know it's me. And so Lee picks a Shakespeare quote. The quote, which she thought was very appropriate in the minute, was, what a piece of work is man. He didn't laugh, he just kind of smiled and said, okay then, and Lee left. The ride to her boyfriend's house, thought that was a funny interaction, right? Doesn't think anything of this. 11 years go by, Lee's living in a foreign country. She's at a bar by herself, and a gentleman slides up to the bar next to her and says, what a piece of work is man. He swears it really happened. If you're new here, Spooky Scary Storytime is a series where I share allegedly true spooky scary stories, the things that you think nobody else will believe. If you have a story, I would love to read it.
I must be living under a rock, because a couple posts ago, I told a story of an allegedly true account of somebody or a few people experiencing a dog-like creature. And very quickly, I learned from all of you that this is some dogman creature. It's a thing that I never heard of before. I've heard werewolf stories. Is this like the same as Dogman, or are they two different things? Since that story, I've been getting messages, comments, and videos sent to me about their own accounts of this Dogman. One of them comes from one of my followers, and I'm not sure if he wants to remain anonymous or not, but he tells the story of his encounter with this Dogman. He said that this happened back in the 90s, which is around the same time that other story I told took place. He said at the time, he was living in Texas. He said he was married with a son, and his in-laws owned a ministry, and they were having a late night sermon. He said he'd heard this sermon before, so he decided to go take a drive in his truck. He was driving around an area where not a lot of people lived, and he came across one of the properties that looked like it was recently purchased. He said he could tell because that property in particular was very nicely cleaned up.
He said about 50 feet into the property, there was this really big oak tree, and he noticed something looked like it was climbing down from this tree. It seemed pretty big, and he was taken aback, so he pulled over to get a better look and see what the heck was climbing down this tree. He opened the door, got out of the truck, left the door open, and stepped a few more feet away from the truck to get a closer look. He could hear the sounds of its claws tearing into the tree bark as it grasped the limbs on its way down. He noted that it had really long fingers and claws. As it made its way down the tree, he could see just how tall this thing really was. He said its back was huge and wide, and then it narrowed down as it got to his waist, almost creating like a V shape. And he said he noticed it had a light brown tail that looked a little bit short for the rest of its body size, probably about a foot in length. This thing had the head of a wolf and the arms of a human, including its back, and its legs were very muscular. He said that when it finally got to the ground, he would assess that it was over 8 feet tall, and it was so muscular that you could see the details of its muscles through its fur. So this thing's back is still to him, and he backs up and he goes into his truck to grab one of his pew-pews. He aimed at his buttocks and gave it one good shot to the left side, and all it did was flinch and slowly look over its shoulder to stare straight at him. Almost like, why did you just do that? So the fact that it didn't do much to this huge creature, he is freaking out now. He throws his pew-pew into the truck, jumps in, and he hightails it out of there down the road. He said there was no exit down the road that he went, so he was forced to turn around and go back past that area. So he said he's never gone so fast in his life. He must have been going 100 miles an hour flying past that property. He said he went back to the church and he just sat there quietly till it was done, and he's never told anybody about it since, until now. He lives in Wisconsin now, and he's been here for about 20 years. His son is 36 now, and he tells him, if you ever go into the woods, never go alone, and always take your pew-pew. What is it with Texas in the 90s, guys? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. Please share any stories that you have like this one. I am fascinated. And if you haven't done so already, don't forget to follow for more creepy story time.
What does it mean when someone witnesses something spooky, spiritual, paranormal in their home just one time, but nothing ever happens ever again? A follower named Yuen said that she got home from school and she was in her room relaxing, scrolling on TikTok, and out of nowhere she hears the kitchen sink turn on and clearly hears someone washing their hands. Her and her brother would often get home together or at the same time, so she figured that it was her brother. So she is just there scrolling away, and then she thinks of a funny idea. Her and her brother are always pranking each other, doing sibling things, and she's like, I should prank him. So she is slowly going into her dad's room and is waiting for her brother. She's like, he has to pass by here in order to go to his room. So she's hiding there. She clearly hears the water faucet turn off, and then she hears footsteps going towards their hallway. So the footsteps are getting closer, getting louder, and she's ready to pop out, and when she does, there's nobody there. And she's like, okay, this guy's gonna try to scare me. So she's going up and down, going through the rooms, up and down the hallway, going through the whole house. Yeah, nobody's there. What's crazy is that she says that she's never witnessed anything before this and never witnessed anything after this. She knows it's not her imagination because she wasn't asleep. She obviously got up, went to her dad's room, jumped in the hallway to try to scare her brother that wasn't there. So what could this be? This is bizarre because normally when someone tells me a spooky story, or it must have been like something scary that happened at an Airbnb, or something that was continuously happening, not something in their home that just happened one time and never again. What do you guys think? Thank you, Yuen, for sending me your spooky story. If you guys have any stories that you'd like for me to read, please send them via DM or email, and I love to read them. And I will see you guys in the next spooky story. Bye!
Get comfy and get cozy. It's spooky story time. This story was sent in by one of my followers named Nicole. She asked to share with y'all, so give her a follow down below. It says, my name is Nicole. I was born and raised in Laredo, Texas. I have a Mexican father and an Arab mother. My father's mother, which is my grandmother, was a witch. Her and her family and my father's father, which is my grandpa, they're all witches from Mexico. When my grandpa and grandmother were building their home in Laredo, Texas, my father's aunt told my grandmother, "Here are some coins to bless the home." But those coins weren't to bless the home. It was witchcraft. Okay, fast forward to when my parents meet. My mother said in the beginning, strange things would happen in my grandmother's home, like noises, shadows, whispering, crazy things no one would believe, to the point where she saw a girl in a long white gown. She said while her and my father were arguing, she went downstairs and sat on the couch. As she was sitting there crying, a young girl walked in front of her in a white long gown. She also told me one time my uncle found a voodoo doll in my grandmother's home. While he was renovating the cabinets, he found the doll with a cloth of my grandfather's shirt sewn on it. Him and my mother were shocked, so they told my grandmother, and my grandmother said it must have been Maite, which is my father's aunt. But my mom didn't believe that, because if my father's aunt wanted to do witchcraft, she would have kept it at her home, like she always has done. So my mother was suspicious of my grandmother, because my grandmother would always say, "I wish Raul would be unalived already." She would say it constantly, wishing on his death. So it actually happened. My grandmother and father are the most despicable people ever. Oh gosh, that whole family is evil, pure evil. Okay, so fast forward. My father's aunt always wanted my grandpa unalived because he had lands and wealth in Mexico. She ended up being unalived by her own husband. He turned up the thermostat and unalived her. I believe she had pulmonary disease. Then he unalived himself right after. With her. He turned up the gas for himself. They ended up finding them weeks later, with worms eating them. My mother said it was the nastiest thing ever. Oh my gosh, Nicole. This story is truly fucking scary. Thank you for sharing that with me. Nicole did send me another story I'll be posting soon, and she said she would be updating me with some more scary stories about her family, which now have me very intrigued. If you love true scary stories, give me a follow, and if you have one that you want to share, I would love to hear it.
She carried a black trash bag in both hands, walked towards the dumpsters, threw it in, got back in her car, and drove off. But inside that trash bag wasn't only trash. Inside was her newborn baby, wrapped in a towel, umbilical cord still attached, left in a dumpster. Big warning at the beginning of this video, we're talking about a child. You guys already know what it is. Your mental health is #1 priority, always has been, always will be. If you think that listening to this is going to harm your mental health in any way, shape, or form, I mean it when I say skip this video. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in my next one. I love you. Alexis Aila is from Hobbs, New Mexico. That's where she lived with her family. She's the baby of the family and has 2 older siblings, 1 sister, 1 brother. And from what I could find, her childhood was completely what people would call normal and happy. She was a happy kid. She was loved. She was supported. As a little girl, she played sports. She got along with her siblings, got along with everyone at school. It wasn't until she really grew up and got into her teenage years that she began having a hard time. I think you could say that a lot of her behavior was what most people would consider to be normal teenage behavior. She had a lot of big mood swings. Her mood was completely unpredictable. She was also the type to feel everything very intensely, to feel her emotions very deeply. As a teenager, she also began pushing her parents' boundaries, arguing often, questioning them, and just pushing their buttons really, and in turn that caused her relationship with her parents to be pretty rocky. She definitely was the kind of girl who leaned a lot more on her friends than she did her family. She would open up to her friends about what she had going on in her school life, her love life, her social life, all the things, but when it came to her parents, she wasn't likely to open up to them really at all. And I think at times that left her parents feeling quite distant from her, and all of that isn't completely unheard of, but there were little things that made her parents question if there was something deeper about her behavior going on, or with her behavior. And they found out that there was. Alexis was diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder. Unfortunately, she wouldn't be officially diagnosed with that until later on down the line. So even though the effects of having bipolar disorder were very much showing through her personality when she was just starting off in high school, they didn't know what it was, so her diagnosis was left untreated. In March of 2020, Alexis was 16 years old and going into her sophomore year of high school when she switched schooling from in-person to online, because we all know what happened in 2020. And for a person like Alexis, who already had a hard time bonding with her parents, since being locked in her house 24/7 with limited ways to distract herself was going to prove to be very tough. By the time she got back into school in person, she was a junior in high school and she got into a relationship with a 16-year-old boy named Steven. And in April of 2021, the couple found out that they were pregnant. I guess they took a pregnancy test as some sort of joke. I don't know what they were doing, but it was supposed to be a joke, but they saw that they actually were pregnant and they panicked. Alexis never wanted to be a teen mom. She freaked out, he freaked out, but then that was that. They find out that Alexis is growing a human being inside of her, and what do? They freak out for a few minutes and then they forget about it, I guess. Or they pretend to, because they were really acting like it was no big deal. Maybe showing a defense mechanism, I don't know, but they literally did not want to talk about it. One of Alexis's friend who knew her from freshman year would later say that she had heard her mention a pregnancy, saying, quote, "I heard her talk about being pregnant around late September, early October. She never expressed that it was a bad thing that she was pregnant," end quote. Although apparently her and Steven never talked about it. I would like to think that they did, but I really don't think they did. And in Alexis's head, she always knew that keeping the baby was not going to be an option. She wasn't ready to become a mom in any way, shape, or form. She also wasn't ready or willing to tell her family, and the very few friends that she did tell, she also let know that she wasn't planning on keeping it. A couple of months passed, and then there is trouble in paradise. The puppy love that was once there between Alexis and Steven was no longer, and it became so bad between them, to the point that police officers got involved, and Steven was not allowed to go to Alexis' house ever again. This sent Alexis into a chaotic, unstable state of mind. She was depressed, she was furious with Steven, but then she was standing up for him. She would get mad at him, but then she would get mad at her mom, and then the anger would just turn into sadness. It was bad all around, and Alexis ended up running away, but when she returned home, she just completely shut down, still not sharing with her parents the fact that she was pregnant and still ignoring that situation altogether. And by August of 2021, Alexis and Steven called it quits on their relationship for good. That's also when she tells him the very, very sad news that she had lost the baby. Was that true? No. And was she lying to the baby's father? 1,000,000% yes. And by the end of 2021, only getting closer and closer to her due date, Alexis had managed to somehow, someway successfully hide her pregnancy from everyone around her. She was still ignoring it. She wasn't doing absolutely anything to address it, nothing to take care of herself or her baby. And according to her parents, they did notice that she was putting on weight, but they didn't really think much of it. She found out that she was pregnant in April of 2021. On January 7th of 2022, Alexis Aila gave birth on her own at home in secret in the bathroom. She woke up in the middle of the night because she was experiencing severe pain, went to the toilet, and delivered her baby. Did she wake anyone up? No. Did she tell anyone? No. Instead, the following morning, she wrapped up her newborn baby boy in a towel, grabbed a black trash bag full of trash, and put both the bag of trash and her baby wrapped in the towel in the back of her car. She drove around for a little while until she ended up driving to a big dumpster in a parking lot of a JCPenney, and then she grabbed the bag full of trash, opened it up, grabbed her baby wrapped in the towel, placed the baby in the trash bag on top of the trash, and tied it sealed tightly. Then she pulled up right next to the dumpster and tossed the closed bag with her baby in the trash, dumped it, and drove off. It's sick. It's vile. It's so disturbing. Not to mention, New Mexico has a safe haven law, meaning that under the law, a parent can surrender an infant that is 90 days or younger at a hospital, at a fire station, at any law enforcement agency. They could drop off the baby, no questions asked, and they would be protected from criminal prosecution for abandonment. Alexis could have dropped off her baby at any one of these locations to give him a chance, to give a loving family a chance at having a baby, which a lot of people would consider to be a miracle. But did she do that? No. She treated her baby as nothing more than a piece of trash. Alexis drove off, went home, and continued acting like nothing had ever happened. However, at 8 p.m. that same night, a group of 3 people, dumpster divers, went to the same dumpster in that JCPenney parking lot, and they were there to dig through the trash to see if they could find anything of value. They're digging through the trash when they hear crying, and they assume that it's coming from an animal. They keep digging until they find the black bag, pull it out, and that's when they make the horrifying discovery of finding the newborn baby boy, who had been inside of that trash bag in the cold in the dumpsters for well over 5 hours or more at this point. And as you can imagine, they were sick to their stomachs. The girl in the group immediately picked up the baby and held him in her arms. He was still alive, luckily somehow, because it was freezing outside, and he was clearly very weak but still crying. He was cold to the touch. The umbilical cord was still attached, and one of the guys called 911 to report what they just found. It is so sad. It is so incredibly sad. When paramedics arrived, the baby boy was still breathing, but he was struggling to be able to because he was so cold. His skin had completely turned blue and purple by that point. He was showing signs of hypothermia and low oxygen. He also had a cut on his head, assuming that that was from when the bag was thrown and his little head made contact with the metal dumpster. The baby was rushed to the hospital, and the doctors tried everything in their power to make sure that this little baby boy made it through the night, while a different group of officers worked on identifying who had done this. It did not take them long to identify Alexis Aila because her name was in a piece of trash that was found in the trash bag that the baby was found in. And they also quickly got a hold of the CCTV footage and only further confirmed who she was by running the license plate number. They showed up to her house, her parents answered the door and said that Alexis could not come to the door because she was feeling really sick and she was in bed. But officers were not having it. They forced her to get out of bed and get to the station for questioning. And the interrogation of that is really something. Alexis is really something, and I mean that in a negative way. She does say the story of giving birth in the bathroom. She does tell him that, but she says that she found out that she was pregnant yesterday, as in one day before giving birth. Lie number one, they say, interesting, a friend of yours actually told us that you were pregnant back in March and that you told this friend named Walker. And Alexis goes, no, I don't know a Walker. Lie number two, she says that after giving birth, she was very, very scared and she didn't know what to do, but she does admit to putting her baby in the trash and then in the dumpster, saying, quote, I put it in the bag, I took it to the car, I drove around and I just didn't know what to do and I just put it in there, end quote. Alexis did try to defend herself by saying, quote, I'm the baby, end quote, and repeatedly stating that she had just turned 18 as if that was reason enough to excuse her actions. Stephen, the father of the baby, was made aware of the situation, and you can imagine the shock on his face when he found out that Alexis had lied about losing the baby. But by a true miracle, the baby boy made it through the night. He needed a ton of love and care and attention because he was so close to not surviving, but he did. And he was placed in the custody of Stephen, and him alongside of his family had been taking care of him. And it warms my heart to be able to tell you guys and to know that the little boy will grow up and hopefully live a very long and happy and healthy life. And I hope that he's able to accomplish every single dream he ever has. Alexis Aila was charged with 2 charges, and she was taken to court where again she made a fool out of herself by trying to say she didn't know any better because she was freshly 18. In my opinion, it was clear that she showed absolutely no remorse. If anything, she felt bad for herself and not her child. She pled not guilty but was found guilty and sentenced to 16 years in prison. But guess what? Her lawyers appealed. And she was let out on bail in 2023 pending her appeal. But now, on Monday, November 17th, the New Mexico Court of Appeals ruled that her conviction still stands and that she is to be sent back into custody. So that was earlier in this month. The latest update that I could find was from an attorney general making a statement that reads, quote, my office alongside District Attorney Deanna Luz prosecuted this case, and we are extremely fortunate that the child survived this horrific ordeal. My office will now focus on providing the support necessary to get Mrs. Aila remanded back into custody, end quote. I'm not sure how long the process takes. I hope that she is back in custody as we speak because I think that she deserves to be. Evil, straight up evil. And it's so sad to think that there are human beings in the world that do this. That is all I have for today's case. Thank you guys for spending time with me today. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
Our evil landlady. I saw the face of my own husband in a pot of water stood in the middle of our landlady's bedroom. Story time. My husband got a new job in a different city, which meant that we had to move. Prior to that, we had searched for houses and we couldn't find one. It was either too expensive, too small, or not just to our taste. Anyway, we decided to move over there, but then we stayed in an Airbnb while searching for a place. One day, as we were out and about, we saw a poster on a notice board next to this house, and it was looking for tenants. So we stopped by. We rang the bell, and a lady came out, very nice, very well dressed, and she welcomed us, saying, "Children of God, you are welcome." I was happy. To me, that's a good sign. She took us in, showed us the apartment. It had 2 bedrooms, which was perfect for us because we have got a young daughter. And also, it was fully furnished. It had everything and more that we needed. So, we asked the question why it was still empty. She told us that people come and go. I never thought much of what she said. Anyway, we signed a contract and we took the apartment. We moved in, and then, shortly after, I started noticing strange things happening. One night, I was walking up to someone humming. I opened the door to check. I didn't see anyone. And then I just went back to sleep thinking it might be one of the tenants. Then The second week, I was out in the compound washing. One of the tenants came and she started to whisper to me. She was looking around as if someone was watching her. She was very scared. So she whispered and told me, if I were you, I would leave this house as soon as possible. I was shocked because why is she telling me this? I asked her why. She whispered, there are strange things happening in this house. And also, she gave me this stern warning, never ever to leave the house late at night or let my daughter out on her own. I heard the landlady call her name. The lady, very shocked and scared, she walked fast back to her room. I never thought much to what the lady said. But then, a month go past, and weirder and stranger things started to happen. I put my daughter to sleep one night. I was sat there after she fell asleep. But tell me why. My daughter started to talk in her sleep. She told me that the landlady said she can come and play with the other children underground. I thought it was just a dream. So I prayed for my daughter and I went to bed. Following that, my husband started acting very strange. He wasn't himself. He was distant, unusually quiet, and also, he sometimes forgets to come home. I thought he was cheating, but that wasn't the case. So, one night, he came home looking dazed. He went straight to bed. It was unlike my husband. And as he laid there, he started to talk in his sleep. He started chanting weird words that I have never heard from my husband. So, I prayed for him. I put some holy water in his mouth. He screamed as if something was burning him. And then he woke up, struggling to breathe. I asked him if everything is okay. He told me that he heard the voice of our landlady calling his name. I was shocked, so we instantly prayed together. Then the next morning, the landlady came visiting with food. She said I look unusually tired and she thought I might be too tired to cook, and therefore she brought some food for me and my family. I thanked her and she left. When I opened the food, I saw black substance in the food. I thought, I'm not going to feed this to our family, so I chucked it in the bin. Tell me why, when I went to empty the bin, I saw some slimy stuff coming out of the bin bag. I chucked it away and didn't think much of it. Then, more stranger things started to happen. I was seeing strange figures in our bedroom. These figures were coming through the wall. Sometimes they crawled on the wall. I didn't know what was going on. I decided to go see a pastor. I told him everything and he said, I need to pray and I must fight this battle on my own. He gave me some Bible verses, also holy water, anointed oil, and also some directions I must follow to fight this battle. I took it and I left. When I got home, one of the tenants came running to me. He whispered something dark and scary to me. He said, be careful. You should move out as soon as possible. I didn't know what he was talking about. I asked him, what's going on? He said to me, you might not believe what I'm about to tell you. I said to him, please tell me. Then he said, he has been hearing voices of children, men and women coming from under the ground. I heard our landlady's voice again. The tenant shivered and even peed himself. He ran away. That night, I saw him packing his stuff and he left the house. Following that, tell me why. One day, we were woken up by this scream coming from our daughter. I rushed to her room. Tell me why. There was a little girl sat at the edge of her bed. When I called onto the name of Jesus, this little girl turned around, looked at me with these sharp, bright eyes and disappeared. The next morning, the landlady came knocking on my door. I checked the peephole and I saw her. I didn't open the door this time, but she spoke. She said, I know you're there and you're refusing to open. This house belongs to me and anything that lives in this house. And she left. I felt fear for the first time. I knelt on my knees and I prayed. Then come night, my little girl started to cough violently. Her skin hot to the touch, her breathing very faintly. I was worried and I rushed her to the hospital. They checked and they couldn't find anything wrong with my little girl. Then, hours later, she was pronounced dead. We buried her, but then something within me told me my little girl isn't dead. She's not gone. She's still with us. Weeks go by and stranger things started to happen. My husband was stood outside our landlady's bedroom door, staring, very stern. I went out and I asked him what he's doing there. He whispers, she's calling me. She's asking me for help, but she wasn't there, so I don't know what he was going on about. I took him back to the house and I prayed with him. Tell me why. The landlady came to me and said, your husband belongs to me now. Your daughter is with me now. This freaks me out. I went back to the church with my husband this time. The pastor prayed for me and my husband. My husband started to cough violently. Then something very black came out of his mouth. The pastor said, you are battling something that keeps spirits. That landlady is a keeper of spirits, and you must fight even stronger this time. He gave us more directions. We returned back home. Tell me why. The next day, I woke up to my husband gone. His belongings still in the house. His phone, keys, everything there. I didn't know what was going on, so I decided to knock on the landlady's door. She opened and said, I told you, didn't I? He belongs to me now. And she closed the door with this chilling laughter. I left. I went to sleep in my daughter's bedroom. Tell me why. I heard my daughter's cry. She's asking me to help her. She said the landlady is keeping her underground with the other children. Midnight comes and I hear whispers, humming sound coming from outside. I decided to go out. The humming sound was coming from the backyard. I decided to go, holding my Bible, the holy water and anointing oil. When I got there, I saw a door underground. I opened it. It had a staircase and I went down the staircase. It smelled disgusting, very dark. So I put on the flashlights on my phone. Then I started hearing cries of women, men, children. Then dark figures hovering everywhere. I heard the voice of my daughter. When I looked on the wall, it had names of children, women, men written on the wall. Then I heard incantations coming from a room. When I peeked through the window, I saw our landlady. She was surrounded by dark figures, but in the middle of that room stood a pot filled with water. Tell me why my husband's face was in that water. I stumbled, but then stood firm. I started to spray the holy water everywhere, the anointing water, praying. The landlady appeared before me. Then she laughed. You think your prayer can do anything to me? I'm a keeper of souls and nothing would happen to me. She said, all of these souls you see in here disobeyed, tried to run away, and this is what happened to them. You will be next. I didn't give up. I continued praying and I pointed the Bible towards her. I started spraying the holy water on her. Then she started to scream. It was as if she was on fire. I could see smoke coming out of her body. Then she disappeared. The whole room went silent. I left. When I went back to my room, my husband was sat on the bed, looking confused.
I need to tell you this story as soon as possible as a warning to you all. I can't undo what I did, but there might be hope for you because I'm telling you right now, I wouldn't wish Mr. Sniffles on my worst enemy. I'm a 34-year-old horror fiction writer and I had needed to finish my latest novel, The Husband in the Window. And to be honest, I was struggling. It had been at least 5 years since I struggled with writing, but now it was back with a vengeance. The good news? My agent, Andrea, had thought of something which might help. Honey, it's just writer's block. Listen to your auntie Andrea and go and stay in my retreat. It's in the middle of nowhere. You want some inspiration? Well, this place is the place to get inspired. I could imagine her now, her bright red hair bunched on top of her head, her wide, red, painted mouth smiling. It was her signature look. I smiled, but there was a feeling in my stomach that was telling me that this wasn't a good idea. A log cabin over Christmas, alone. Andrea, I know I'm a bit of a hermit, but this might be a bit too isolated even for me. Honey, I'm telling you, no internet, no distractions, just you. No, did you turn it on by accident? Oh, gosh.
That was horrific. I'm deaf. I'm actually...
To be fair, you've just turned me up on yourself.
Oh my God, I'm deaf. I'm actually deaf.
Have you... We'll have a New York Times bestseller on our hands before we ring in the new year. Andrea knew that that was my weakness. I needed that bestseller. It was my dream, and she might be right. What if this cabin was the key to unlocking it? So I ignored that feeling, and that was my first mistake. The cabin was perfect when I arrived. Cosy, quiet, and decorated with Christmas touches, which Andrea had organised. A cupboard bursting with Advocaat and a fridge of Baileys.
Oh, this is for you.
The fridge was stocked and bulging with festive food. The decorations were beautiful. I even had a real tree. Andrea had gone all out. I took a shining to one decoration in particular, a porcelain Santa with cracked paint on the ass. I wrote like crazy. It was like I was possessed. My story changed, and it was no longer about the husband. Now, the story was about a ghostly figure haunting a woman who rents a cabin in winter, a man in black glasses, a tall top hat, and bright red lips. Well, just think about that for a second. Isn't that
Makes
foul?
me think of a ventriloquist dummy.
A character, a work of fiction. I was a writer, I knew all about fiction, but this guy felt much more real than that. He even had a name that I didn't give to him. Mr. Sniffles.
Oh.
I just knew that that was his name and I had no idea how. By the third night, I was deep into the story when I heard it. 3 knocks on the front door. I froze. No one else was supposed to be up here. I thought I was isolated. When I peered through the peephole, I swear my stomach turned to ice. Standing there, tall, thin, dressed exactly as I'd written him, was the man with the black glasses and the red lips. He mouthed something I couldn't hear at first, and then he said something a bit clearer. His smile was spreading too wide to be human.
Oh.
I like your stories. I slammed the door, shoved a table against it, and didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, there were footprints in the snow leading up to the porch. The prints, they looked like they were from dress shoes. Something was wrong. And it wasn't just the fact that in this isolated cabin, it seemed that someone else was there, but that the footprints led straight to my door, but there were none leading away. I tried to rationalise it. Maybe I'd made them myself, maybe it was an animal, but deep down, I knew that none of these explanations made sense. But I had to ignore what was going on. I needed to finish this book, and if I got petrified and ran away, I would never finish it. Which is a fine idea in theory, and that night, I'd almost put the man with the red lips to the back of my head until the power went out. I ran around the house lighting candles. It's okay, relax, nothing's going to happen, you're fine, I said to myself. An hour later, and I was deep into the writing again. Candlelight flickered and danced around the room, and as I was writing, I saw the candlelight in the reflection of my laptop screen. And then I screamed. I saw his reflection standing right behind me. He whispered, "Kissy, kissy, my red lippies." And everything went black. When I came to, it was morning. The candles had melted into puddles of wax, and the night before it felt almost like a dream. The white, frosty light of the morning poured through the windows, and I felt a little less scared, a bit more practical. The cabin was obviously affecting me, and I just had to get through the book, and then I could leave. But something weird had happened. There was no signal up here, and I was used to just looking at a blank screen, but I had a message. An image from Andrea. A picture of her at this cabin, standing out front, waving a hand at the photographer. I looked down again, and this time I noticed something else. In the reflection of the cabin window, behind her, Mr. Sniffles.
Kissy, kissy, my red lippy.
Kissy, kissy, my red lippies.
It's Nicolas Cage in my head now.
Yeah, long legs. Then I heard Andrea's voice from the kitchen. Soft, broken. Don't let him in. I ran towards the sound, but the kitchen was empty except for a photo lying on the counter. Me and Andrea, 5 years younger, smiling beside a Christmas tree. Between us, a blurry figure. Tall hat, red lips, and then a soft sniff from behind me. He was there again, closer this time. His head tilted, lips wet, dragging in another long, hungry sniff. "Why are you called Mr. Sniffles?" I asked. He smiled. "Because I can smell the blood on your hands." He then took my hand and led me to the basement door. I knew what I'd see when he opened it. The smell hit me at first. Dust, age, cold, underlying sweet smell. Years and years of decay. Andrea's body was curled on the floor, wrapped in a Christmas scarf. Of course, by this time, she didn't look like Andrea anymore. It had been years since she'd been killed. She was a little more than a mummy now. I only knew it was her because I was the one who'd put her there.
What?
Memories came flooding back. The ones I'd put out of my head. Andrea and I had come out together here, Christmas, our first one, together. I don't need to spell it out for you. Andrea was. That's going to take a while to get used to. My agent. A few parties and drinks after we'd signed that contract, we'd realised that we were much more. Eventually we fell in love, and this was meant to be our first Christmas together in her little isolated cabin in the woods. I'd really fallen for Andrea. Her red, kissable lips. Kissy, kissy, my red lippies.
Oh my god.
I couldn't wait to start our lives together. That was until she'd read my book. My new book. I'd written another one, and I'd brought it up so that Andrea could read it. Cozied up in the cabin with the fire, she read my brand new book. It was called Mr. Sniffles, and it was a ghost story. My first ghost story, and I was so proud of it. She told me that she hated it, It was the worst thing I'd ever written, and I saw red, her stupid red hair and her stupid red lips. I hated her in that moment. How could she do that to me? It was some of my best work. She said that Mr. Sniffles wasn't realistic enough. It was a ghost story. It wasn't meant to be realistic, but she laughed at it. She said the New York Times wouldn't use this book as a doorstop, let alone put it on their bestseller list. I couldn't listen to any more of her drivel, so I grabbed the closest thing to me, but the porcelain Santa with a crack in his ass, and I smacked her over the head with it. I hit her over and over while shouting, Mr. Sniffles is real! I have to admit, my mental health hasn't been the best all these years. That might be why I still hear her voice in my head, why I think I can still see lipstick on the rotted corpse of my old girlfriend. Mr. Sniffles is new, though. It's funny, I'd love for Andrea to be here now. I would love to hear her say that Mr. Sniffles isn't realistic, because now he's as realistic as anything. She'd hear the footsteps coming up the stairs right now, just like I can. She'd hear the giggling. I can hear him say, kissy kissy, my red lippies. And now I guess you're reading it. Because if you start hearing a wet, rattling, sniffy giggle behind you tonight, don't turn around. Because it could be the worst thing you've ever done coming back to haunt you.
Let's read some scary stories that were sent to us. I was 4 to 5 years old, and at the time I lived in my childhood house. I shared a room with my mom and dad, and my bed was right next to theirs. One night, I woke up and the room was freezing cold, which was weird because it was summer, but I didn't think much of it. I had to pee, so I went to the bathroom, and this is where it gets interesting. While I was in the bathroom with the lights turned off, I felt a tap on my shoulder and something or someone pushed me on the ground. The next day, my mom found me lying on the bathroom floor because I was too scared to look and just stayed there. We later found out the previous owner's autistic son passed away in that bathroom, so maybe it was his spirit. I still have the scar I got from being pushed down, and I remember the moment vividly. That's really sad that the previous owner's son passed away in that house. Maybe he just wanted to play or something. I had a sleepover at my friend's house, and we were up until at least 2 or 3 in the morning. We were in her room cleaning and rearranging it, and I had walked out of the room to fetch a mop and broom from the kitchen. As I walked into the hallway and walked back to my friend's bedroom door, I see her crouching behind the door. I just thought she wanted to scare me. As I looked around the door, I saw nothing. So I screamed my friend's name and started crying. She came running out of the other room, so I was really freaked out at this point. I thought it was her the whole time because it was her size, the thing had her face, eye color, and hair color. Anyway, we finished cleaning the room, ate, and showered. As we finally got into bed to go to sleep, I saw a black figure move across her door, from left to right. I frantically looked at my best friend and back at the door, then suddenly saw long black fingers coming from around the door frame. I turned back to my friend and asked if she saw it too, but she said no. As I looked back at the door, the fingers were gone. So I don't know what it was or what it could be. This story is kind of funny to me because I remember being a kid and staying up really late with my friends and doing weird stuff, just rearranging our bedrooms or something. But I never had anything like this happen to me. And I'm glad it didn't, because that's freaky. One day, me and my friend were walking around in town, and it got to a point where we were thinking, let's do something fun. Every time me and this girl are together, we get into the creepy and weird. I'm talking supernatural, true crime, etc. So we were trying to search for something to do. Originally, we were looking for something spiritual to do, as we both are interested in spiritual experiences like connecting with a past loved one, as we both have often received signs from people we have lost, but we couldn't find anything to do. So we thought, let's do something scary instead. Here is the big mistake. We downloaded the Randonautica app. We did, however, set our intention to scary but safe because we're not too out of our minds. The app is loaded and we are on our way. We were walking for what felt like forever, and now things are starting to get weirder as we get closer to the location. We were walking and we see a Red Bull car, like the ones you see on TikTok where you can open the back and there's Red Bulls inside. Anyway, it was our first time seeing one, and we're not Red Bull drinkers ourselves, but it was still a cool thing to find as they're not too common where we live. So we go over and we're checking out the car. It was empty, unfortunately, and we were talking about how crazy this was. Then we hear, "Is this your car?" We look up, and out of nowhere, an older gentleman appears and approaches us. We say no, obviously, and he tells us that 2 young girls drive the car. We just found it weird because the car park was empty, like not a person in sight. So we're polite to him and speak, but not to hold conversation. Then we go on our way to finish our journey. A little further on, there was a car wash, the type where it's a team of about 5 people and they wash the car by hand for you, and the vibe was just kind of, if you know what I mean. But we don't think too much and we go on. Finally, we reach the destination and it's on this street. As we turned the corner, instantly it felt wrong. It was busy but dead all at the same time. I really can't describe it, but it was almost like the people felt empty. But everyone had something in common. They were looking at us like we weren't supposed to be there. I really can't describe it, but we both remember this street slightly different. But one thing we can totally agree on is that we were not welcome there. We both swear we felt like people were looking at us weirdly, and we also can both agree that across the road from the location there was a pub. It looked closed down, like it hadn't been used in a while, but there were 2 men sitting on a bench with a pint talking. We got the heck out of there. We keep speculating on what could have happened, researching the street, etc., and we have no conclusion. Okay, I have a friend who had like a similar experience to this where they like turned down the road and they ended up like in a weird old looking town and everybody looked the same and everybody was just staring at them and like looking at them like they didn't belong there. Like, what the heck are you doing here? It was like they stumbled into like a different universe, but they turned around and got the hell out of there. But anyway, this story reminded me of that. So I don't know, I've never used the Randonautica app before. What do y'all think this was? I've heard that app is like really scary and people shouldn't be using it, but I don't know, I'm like kind of tempted to try it because I've never tried it before. Let's read some scary stories that were sent to us. The first 2 are from the same person, and then the last 2 are going to be from another person, but like the same person. You know what I mean? Okay, so this first person is really into like witchcraft and like Hecate, just for context. One day I was chilling in my room. I was waiting for my laundry to finish. I keep my door open so I could hear the beeping when it was done. While I was scrolling on my phone, I got a feeling like I was being watched. So I looked up from my screen and saw a tall, dark, white-eyed figure staring at me. It didn't feel bad or give off any negative energy, but it did scare me. I walked up to the door as it was standing in the door frame, and I closed my door without looking at it. I said in my mind, "I'm scared, please leave." I didn't see it afterwards when I went to get my laundry. Somehow, I'm less scared of the dark after that encounter. I would not have been brave enough to walk to the door and close it. Okay, part 2. I used to love watching scary stories on YouTube, especially these 2 guys who talked about paranormal games. One day when I went to sleep, I had a weird dream. At first, all I could notice was that everything was purple, as if there was a filter. I was in my mom's car in my favorite spot. The car was driving in a desert and there was no driver. I was all alone. After some time, the car passed through a white light, then my instincts kicked in. I remember I watched a video about a dream with a light, the exact one I had. I remembered, if you see the light, hold your breath, don't move, don't talk, don't do anything. And if you don't manage to get out, you'll be stuck there forever. So that's what I did. I held my breath, and for whatever reason, I was able to feel my entire body. So I didn't move, I didn't blink, and with each second, the car went faster and faster. While that was happening, I also felt like I was literally suffocating, and the view of the dream felt like it was in third person. The car kept going faster until I went through a white glowing door and I woke up. Okay, I also have extremely vivid dreams that feel so real, like I can feel things. It's just creepy. And I don't know what it means. I feel like it's astral projection, honestly. Okay, now we're going into the next person's stories. I actually can't remember if there's 2 parts. It might just be one really long story. I think it's just a really long story. Okay, anyway, I'm tired today. When I was in 5th grade, one of my classmates suggested we play a game called Charlie Charlie. We were all naive and joined in for fun. We set up a piece of paper with the words yes and no written on it and stacked 2 pencils on top of each other. We started asking questions, and some of my classmates joked around by blowing on the pencils to make them move and scare us. Since it was nearing lunchtime, we grabbed the piece of paper, hid it, and promised to continue later. When I got home, I went to the kitchen to wash my hands. Suddenly, I started to feel cold. Mind you, it was 30 degrees Celsius, so very hot, and no air was coming in since the windows and doors were shut. I looked around and didn't see anything, so I didn't think much of it. As I continued to wash my hands, I heard a faint whisper of my name, and I felt like I was being watched. It really scared me because beside the sink, there's a very dark storage room. I quickly finished washing my hands and got out of the kitchen. When I was back in class, I heard one of my classmates saying that something had followed them home and that they felt like they were being watched. I quickly said the same thing happened to me. So, we played Charlie Charlie again and asked, "Did someone follow anyone home?" The pencils pointed to yes. No one was blowing on the pencils this time either. Then we asked if it had followed me home, and the pencils slowly moved to yes. It freaked me out so much that I started crying. We ended the game and crumbled up the paper and threw it away. We never speak of it again. Months passed, and I still felt scared when I was home alone. We lived at my grandparents' house, and their floors were very dark, and they had this religious statue in their house. One time, I was alone in the living room playing, and it was dead quiet. The only thing I could hear was the clock ticking. I looked up at the statue and stared at it, and suddenly the eyes moved to look back at me. I got scared and blinked, and the statue's eyes went back to normal. I don't know if it was my imagination, but I didn't stay there long. I quickly went to my grandpa's store, which is right next to his house. Another time, my mom got me a big teddy bear, and I was so happy to have it. Late one night, I had a nightmare that this bear was chasing me, and it grabbed me and was dragging me around. I screamed so loud in my sleep, my mom ran in there and woke me up. I never touched that bear anymore. Years passed, and me, my brother, and my mom moved out of my grandparents' house. I was so happy to live in such a nice house. I'm home alone in the new house every day since my mom has work and my brother has school. One day, I was in the kitchen area eating while watching a video, and in the corner of my eye, I saw a figure running from my room to my brother's room. It looked like a little girl, but I ignored it because I didn't want it to notice me. After I ate my meal, I went back to my room and closed the door and continued watching the video, when all of a sudden, I heard a door slam. I got so scared but mustered up the courage to look, and my brother's door was closed, but there were no windows open, so it couldn't have been the wind. Years have passed and I still live here, and strange things happen when I'm alone, but I usually ignore it. One time, I told my mom about what I had seen, and she quickly shushed me because she says we cannot talk about it. She told me that she sees it too, but we should ignore it and never speak of it. I feel like that Charlie Charlie game, it sounds almost like a Ouija board, like you're inviting something in. So, I don't know. It does sound like something maybe followed you. If anybody has any advice on how to get rid of that, like how to cleanse your home, leave it in the comments so the person who sent me the story can read that and maybe take your advice. They said praying really helps. Hopefully they can pray that thing right out the damn door. Let's read some more scary stories that were sent to us. These are both from the same person. There's a part 1 and a part 2, and these stories come all the way from Italy. This didn't happen directly to me, but to my father. Years ago, he was working in southern Italy with his company, and he and his colleagues lived in a 2-story house in the countryside. My newborn brother was also there. They lived on the first floor, and an elderly woman lived on the second. The house was in the middle of nowhere, on a long, smooth road. One afternoon, they were playing cards in the living room while my brother was sleeping in his crib in the bedroom. They were sitting at the table in front of a French window with the shutters down that led to the balcony. At a certain point, they heard someone knocking on the shutters, but when one of my father's colleagues went to check, there was no one there. At first, they thought it was a prank by some kid, but it was totally impossible for him to have managed to escape without being seen. Shortly after, it happened again, and my father's colleague goes back to check again, and no one is there. At this point, he decides to stand behind the French window so that if they knocked again, he would frame the culprit. But when it happens again, no one is there. At this point, they're all quite confused by the situation and can't come up with a rational explanation. Then my father looked toward the center of the room where there was a drying rack with some laundry hanging, and he noticed that my brother's bib was moving, and everything was closed, so it couldn't have been the wind. My father immediately thinks of my brother, and when he runs into the bedroom to check on him, he discovers that he was choking on vomit. My father straightened him up and he immediately recovered, but he was sure that whatever was knocking on the window was trying to warn him that his little one wasn't well. That one is crazy, and whatever that was definitely trying to warn the dad that the baby was not okay. That is crazy. Okay, part 2. My father has been connected to these kinds of events, more precisely to this entity. In fact, I believe it's some kind of guardian or spirit, but I'm certain it's not an angel. What happened to me dates back to 2 years ago. One night, I woke up with very strong stomach cramps, something that happens to me often because of my period, so I decided to take some painkiller and go to the couch to watch TV. When the medicine started working, I began to drift off and laid down to try to get some sleep. I had the blanket pulled up to the middle of my back. While I was in a half-sleep state, I felt someone stroking my cheek, and right after that, it was as if something were pulling the blanket over me. I thought I had imagined it, but when I opened my eyes, the blanket was actually pulled up. I asked my parents if it was them, and it wasn't. That evening, my father told me that he had seen a young man about 30 years old, dressed in 1960s-style clothing, walking from the hallway to the kitchen. This entity has appeared to my father often, and according to him, it always seemed to be looking at me. But it doesn't end there. I think this entity actually wants to protect me, or maybe punish me for my mistakes. Last year, my best friend slept over at my place for the first time. In the morning, I found her awake at 5 a.m., and she kept telling me that she heard someone knocking on the window shutter. I told her that she probably imagined it or was dreaming, but she had recorded it. You could actually hear someone knocking. Shortly after, I got out of bed and felt a strong burning sensation on my leg. When I checked, there were 2 scratch marks. Today, my best friend and I have argued and lost contact because of very rude and mean behavior that she showed towards me. I am sure the entity wanted to warn me to be careful with her, or at least it wanted to scare her. Maybe this spirit has like a crush on her, or is just protective over her. It does kind of sound like at the end that maybe the spirit was trying to warn her that her friend wasn't a good friend, and maybe the entity was trying to scare her friend so she wouldn't come back. I don't know. What do y'all think?
Story time as to why you should never get involved with something that you see on the side of the road that has absolutely nothing to do with you. The person who submitted this wants to be anonymous. It's actually happened to her friend. Elizabeth and Hector were traveling late one night. They had been married for about 4 to 5 years. They were on a little road trip. Hector happened to take a wrong turn that ended up in the middle of nowhere. As Hector's kind of like turning around, trying to make his way back to the highway, they come across these 3 ladies on the side of the road. 3 ladies were dressed in these like all black like cloaks, and it looked like they were doing something in the ground, like they were burying something in the ground. For whatever reason, this really drew Elizabeth's attention, and she urged Hector to turn around and go see what they were doing. In her mind, she thought that maybe they were like burying like a body, like, or they were doing something horrible to someone, and she wanted to intervene to make sure that if there was like a victim there, that she could help them. Hector, of course, wanted nothing to do with it. He wanted to keep going. They were in the middle of nowhere. He did not want to get involved, but Elizabeth practically like forced them. He turns back around. They go to the same place where they saw the 3 ladies, and the ladies are no longer there. But on the ground, you can clearly see that they have recently buried something. Elizabeth jumps out of the car, goes over to where the ladies buried something, and starts digging to see what it was. She comes across this big giant box, and there are 3 unalive birds in the box, along with some other artifacts. She keeps digging through, and she sees a picture of a young girl, probably about 14 to 15 years old. You can tell it's like a picture of like a mom and like a dad. It's like a whole family that has been put in this box with these unalive birds. Elizabeth knows a lot about brujeria, so in her mind she's like, this is a giant hex that they put on this family. I need to save them from this hex. So she went ahead and she destroyed the whole thing and she kind of threw it. Thinking that that was going to be the end of it, she went back in the car and they went home. Not long after, Elizabeth started having crazy nightmare spells where she was screaming in the middle of the night, having night sweats, sleep paralysis, and her health started to decline. They took her to the doctor and she ended up getting diagnosed with cancer, like a severe form of cancer that like doctors couldn't even explain. One night in Elizabeth's agony, as she's laying in bed screaming for help, she sees 3 females standing at the foot of her bed. All 3 are standing there with the black cloaks and they're staring at her. At first, Hector thought that maybe Elizabeth was hallucinating, so she was on so many different medicines and like pain meds. He didn't believe her until one night he saw the 3 ladies himself. This is what literally clicked in his head, that this all had to do with what happened that night of her disturbing these 3 witches' work. Unfortunately, Elizabeth was not able to get the help that she needed, and not long after she passed away. Hector ended up having to move out of the house because till this day he says that he would hear and see things in that house that he couldn't explain, and he would hear laughter, and sometimes would even see the 3 females himself. So moral of the story is, if you see something, you didn't.
There is very little about this case, but no one's really talking about it, and I think we need to shed some light on it. This is Audrey Glee. I believe that's how you say her name. Again, I can't find much on this case, but what I can find is very scary. Audrey was a school teacher in Linden, Canada. From what I understand, she was an incredibly vibrant person. She had a great sense of humor. She was hilarious. She was very intelligent. It seemed like she really had this zest for life that not many people do. While she was a teacher, she was respected by a lot of people. All of her students said that she was a strict teacher, but she was very fair. Audrey was once married, but this marriage came to an end in the 1970s, and the house that they lived in, her husband deeded it over to her because he said he couldn't imagine anyone else living there. Audrey said, "I will never sell it," and she even had a premonition that she would meet her end in this house, and this premonition would come true. Audrey did start shying away from the public as she got older. She was in a bridge group in the town that she lived in, but she eventually moved away from that bridge group so that she could join online groups. She would communicate a lot through email and stuff like that. She wasn't very out in the public. She was kind of a recluse, but she did have some appointments that she would keep no matter what. One of these was Wednesday coffee in the town that she lived in with another group of ladies. The last time that Audrey was heard of was on December 27th of 2010. She had sent an email to her handyman. He was a 22-year-old guy who would come help her just do handiwork around the house. He really seemed to be one of the only people that would come visit her at her house, but she sent an email to him, and then on December 30th, the same handyman brought her a cake that his wife had made. When he opened the garage door, he found Audrey laying next to her white Camaro. She had passed. Police said this was an incredibly violent passing. At first, they said that this was definitely someone that Audrey didn't know that she had been attacked. But as they continued investigating, they realized that this was actually probably somebody who knew what Audrey was like, knew her routine, and she was very strict about her routine. She took her dogs out at the same time. She had 2 dogs who she loved very much. She would take them out at the same time every day. She would check the mail at the same time every day. She would go into town every Wednesday for this coffee date with her friends. She was very much a woman of routine. Investigators did question someone who apparently he was a squatter. He was living in her barn. Now, this squatter did say that he had permission from the owner to live there, but no one knows if this is true or not. No charges were ever pressed, though. This man is in the clear. They never pressed any charges against him for Audrey's death. They also looked into the handyman that came and spent time with Audrey. They looked into him, and again, nothing was ever found. Like, it seems as if he didn't have anything to do with it. He did take a polygraph test, and it was inconclusive, and police did feel like he wasn't being quite honest with them. But polygraphs aren't reliable. We can't use them in court even, so really, who knows what happened? And when I say that there's not much on this case, that's about it. That's all I could find, unless it was behind a paywall somewhere. There was also a Reddit thread, but I'm kind of hesitant to use Reddit threads for the most part, but this is what's out there. Nobody knows what happened to Audrey. No one knows who took her life. Police did say that there might have been a sexual component to this case. I read in some articles that her pants might have been torn, but police also believe that this could have been a misdirection, that he was trying to guide them in the wrong way. But either way, her case has gone completely unsolved, and I really feel like she deserves justice. One of the saddest parts about this is that even though Audrey was kind of a recluse, she did have 2 dogs. As I mentioned, they were 2 German Shepherds that she loved very much. Those dogs were rehomed, and one of her dogs passed away about a year after she did. She had bought a burial plot for them and asked to be buried with him. One of her good friends, who she left her estate to, actually took Audrey's ashes and secretly buried them with the dogs, even though the caretaker of the pet cemetery said that human remains were no longer allowed there, but she snuck onto the cemetery just so that Audrey could lay next to her dogs. So that is the case of Audrey. What are your guys' thoughts on this? Honestly, I just find it heartbreaking that there is no closure here, but let me know your thoughts down in the comments and follow for more true crime.
You see when the place cold and the rain pitter-pattering on your galvanized roof, and when you watch through your window, you see a whole streak of lightning just light up your room, and the thunder just cracking and vibrating the whole house. That is the perfect time to talk about Trini Paranormal, Trini Folklore, Trini Superstition, and that is exactly what we're going to talk about today. So today we're going to talk a little bit about zombies and some of these superstitions. The older folks may know, the younger folks may not know, but zombies are creatures that have been harassing and plaguing Caribbean countries. So places like Jamaica, it is known as a ducky. In Trinidad and Tobago, we know it as a zombie. I think it's known as a zombie in Martinique. But nonetheless, it is a malevolent or evil spirit that, I mean, there's many beliefs, but there's one main belief that it is of a person who was very evil and violent and destructive in their living state. And when they die, they don't cross over to the light. So they just plague countries and communities because they have nowhere to go. So with zombies, it also has a lot of law and superstition to help you protect yourself from zombie attacks and zombie harassing you and stuff. So these are some that I would have remembered. Let me know if you remember them. The first one, it is believed that zombies cannot cross water. So if it is that you are coming home at night, you are walking through your village and you feel like you are being chased by a zombie, it is advised that you go across a body of water, a stream or a river. In that way, it's going to stop them from chasing you because they can't cross over the water. So it's believed that if a zombie is trying to get into your home, or you suspect that a zombie is trying to get into your home, you have to put a bowl of rice or a bowl of salt by the front door of your home. It is said that they cannot resist counting the grains. So when they see it, they have no choice but to sit there and count every single grain until sun up, where they have to disappear. So putting a bowl of rice or salt in front of your home will mean that the zombie or spirit will have to check each grain. And obviously they can't enter your home because they're busy checking grains. It is also believed that if you reach home late at night, like after 12, you have to walk into your home backwards, reason being, that when you turn around to face them, it's like you're confronting them and you are stopping them from entering your home. So you turn to face them and you walk into the house backwards so that they are seeing your face and they do not feel compelled to come into your home. And this last superstition to me is by far the most creepiest of it all. As you all know, dogs are very sensitive, and sometimes if you hear dogs barking at nothing, or you see them watching a particular area growling and barking, it means that they are seeing spirits or ghosts or zombies that we are unable with our naked eye to see. Now trust me, I have a point. I'm coming to that. Long ago, when communities didn't have current, a lot of the times people would hear the chains dragging from a lagahoo, or they will hear the hooves of lajablas walking around their home, sometime on the roof. They would be hearing paranormal creatures, zombies outside, and sometimes it's not visible to the naked human eye. So the superstition is that you have to take dog yampi, which is like the white stuff you see in the corner of a dog's eyes, put it in the corner of your eyes and look through a keyhole at between 12 and 3 a.m. and you'll be able to see all those paranormal creatures that you are hearing but not necessarily seeing, or all those zombies and spirits that the dogs tend to see that you cannot see. So let me know, have you all ever heard about these paranormal steps that we used to take in the Caribbean, or some of us still take to this day, to avoid, to prevent, or to see the zombies in our community? Let me know.
In 1964, during his final semester of college in Wisconsin, a 21-year-old man named Harry decided to take an acting class. He believed it would be an easy A, and he'd always been pretty shy, and so he figured this class might be able to help him get over that. But this class wound up having a much larger impact on Harry's life than he ever could have imagined. Not only did he meet his future wife in this class, but he also realized he loved acting, something he never thought he would like, and he decided after college that that was the thing he was going to pursue. And so after he graduates later that year, he and his girlfriend get married, and then they fly out to Hollywood, California, where Harry auditions for Columbia Pictures' New Talent Program, which is basically this program that's designed to help new actors and actresses get parts in Hollywood, because it's so hard to do that. And so he's accepted into this program, he signs a contract with them that pays him almost nothing, and right away they start shopping him around for different parts in TV shows and movies, but nobody is interested in Harry. Nobody. The only roles he was getting were incredibly minor and usually non-speaking, and so it was really not advancing his career. Then, in 1966, so 2 years after he and his wife had arrived in Hollywood, Harry received what seemed like his first big break. He was offered a speaking role in a movie, although it was a very minor role. It was a 60-second bit where Harry basically walked on screen in this hotel, and he started calling out for a particular guest, and when he finds this guest, he walks up and gives him a piece of paper, and then he leaves. So it's a forgettable scene, but it's a real scene in a real movie, and so this was a big deal for Harry. And so after Harry goes over to the studio and he films this whole scene and it's all done, he goes back over to the headquarters of the New Talent Program at Columbia Pictures, and as soon as he goes inside, one of the producers that was in charge of this New Talent Program, who had apparently had a chance already to see this 60-second scene in this movie that Harry was in, he calls Harry over and asks him to go up to his office for a second. So the pair go up to his office, they both sit down, and the guy looks at him and says, "Look, I just gotta shoot you straight here. You're not gonna make it in Hollywood. You're not gonna be a movie star." When Tony Curtis was told to carry groceries across this room in one of his first movies, everybody knew right away as he's carrying those groceries that that guy, he's going to be a movie star. You could see it in the scene, even though all he was doing was carrying groceries. And when you did your scene as the bellhop walking around the hotel, I just didn't see it. You don't have the X factor. You're not going to be a movie star. For reference, Tony Curtis, the guy this producer was referencing, was a huge movie star in the 1950s and 1960s. And so Harry, after getting this horrible comment made about him, he pauses for a second, and then he leans across the table and looks at this producer and squints his eyes and says, "You know, if Tony was such a good actor, shouldn't we have believed he was just a grocery delivery boy, not a movie star?" And at this totally smart aleck remark, the producer fired Harry on the spot. Harry would go on to sign a similar New Talent Program deal with Universal Studios, but again, he could not get a real part to save his life. And the feedback he finally got was, "Harry, you're just not pretty enough, and you're not really that talented." By the mid-1970s, Harry was in his mid-30s, and while he still aspired to be an actor and wanted to be an actor, he was making almost no money from acting. And so he decided, instead of acting, he was going to become a carpenter. That was going to be his full-time job, despite the fact he knew nothing about carpentry. And so he literally, just because he has this interest in carpentry, goes to the library and checks out all these how to be a carpenter books. And over the next couple of weeks, he studies these books and does a couple projects around his own house. And then finally, he just felt confident enough, or he was just desperate enough for money, that he began going around to his network and asking people in Hollywood if they needed some woodworking, if they needed help from a carpenter. And surprisingly, lots of people took him up on his offer and they hired him to be their carpenter. And before long, Harry was dubbed the Carpenter to the Stars, which was kind of ironic because he actually was not a very good carpenter, and he was regularly seen on the job, literally holding a book, teaching him how to be a carpenter while doing the carpentry with his other hand. In 1976, Harry was a full-fledged carpenter and had been for about a year when one of his very close friends named Fred Roos, who was a casting director and film producer, gave him a call and told him he had a very unique opportunity for him. Now, at this point, Harry was not looking for any more acting roles. He kind of figured that that ship has sailed, even though he wishes he could be an actor. At this point, he had a wife, he had 2 sons, and so he's thinking, I gotta just keep doing this carpentry thing because I gotta pay the bills. So he says to Fred, I appreciate the offer of whatever this is, but if it has to do with acting, I'm just not interested. And Fred, who was one of the very few people in Hollywood who fundamentally believed Harry was destined to be a star, told Harry, no, this is different. This is not a pure go out and try out for the part and hope for the best. This is like put yourself in a good position and maybe somebody will discover you're as talented as you really are. And so Harry's like, okay, tell me about this opportunity, I'm interested. And so Fred explained there was this really talented and eccentric film director who was trying to cast an upcoming movie. And the way he went about casting for movies was a little bit strange. Instead of having each of the actors and actresses show up and individually audition for their parts, he would group batches of actors and actresses and he would have them audition as a group, because that way he could tell if there was chemistry amongst some of the actors and actresses and he could gauge their individual talent. And so he had all these groups already planned out, but one of the groups was missing one male actor. Somebody had dropped out at the last minute and was not going to be there on the day of the audition. And so when Fred Roos heard through the grapevine that this director was going to be short this one person, he immediately reached out to the director and said, hey, I got your guy. There's this guy, Harry. He's done a little bit of acting. He's incredibly talented. You got to give him a chance. At the minimum, he can come in there and he can at least just read the lines and help you do this audition. But I know he's available that day and I know he would love to help. And so this director tells Fred, okay, thank you. I'd love to have him come down, but stress to him, he is not auditioning for any part in this movie. I'm not bringing in some person and just throwing them in. It takes me a long time to find people that I want to audition, and he is not one of them. He is just there to facilitate the audition. He's just going to read the lines so the other people in his group can do their audition. And so after Fred stopped explaining this situation, Harry was actually kind of annoyed. He was annoyed that Fred had basically already volunteered him, and so he couldn't really even say no without making Fred look bad. And he didn't like the idea that this was basically a waste of his time. He was being asked to go read lines, but not even try out. So how was this even an opportunity? But Fred told him, look, worst case scenario, you meet some pretty powerful people in Hollywood. This director's a big deal. The people there are going to be big deals in Hollywood. So you'll meet them and maybe they will recognize your talent. Or maybe you get some new clients for your carpentry business. So no matter what, you get something out of it. And so finally, Harry says, okay, fine, I'll go do this thing. And so Harry goes to this audition, he's handed the script, and he's reminded repeatedly to not attempt to audition. Don't try to act, just read the lines. I don't care if you're monotone, you just read these lines because you're not auditioning. Everybody else is, you're not. Is that clear? And Harry's like, yes, I get it. I'm just reading the lines. And so Harry sits down and he starts reading the lines and he's trying to do what they told him to do, but the way he was actually feeling and his actual personality began seeping through. He started coming off as this really grumpy and sarcastic guy that just didn't care about anybody there. He was just totally bitter that he was in the situation he was in. And apparently, this is exactly what the director was looking for in one of the characters he was trying to cast. That kind of nonchalant, bravado, macho, alpha type guy who just didn't care about anybody. And so over the course of the day, as he's reading the script over and over again, not caring at all about how he's performing, he's just simply reading these lines and just being himself, he was actually doing this amazing job portraying one of the characters. And so they let Harry go the whole day. No one told him they were looking at him as a potential character. And then at the end of the day, when Harry was about to just throw the script in the trash and leave without talking to anyone, the film director, better known as George Lucas, walks up to Harry, better known as Harrison Ford, and says, wait a minute, I was wrong. You are perfect for this movie, Star Wars. You need to play Han Solo. And so Harrison Ford said, all right, I'll play Han Solo. And that role as Han Solo propelled Harrison Ford into the megastar that we know him as today. A few years after Harrison had starred in Star Wars and he was this total A-list celebrity, he was at a Hollywood studio in one of their restaurants when one of the waiters walked over to him with this silver tray, and on this silver tray was a single business card. So Harrison reaches over, he grabs the business card, the waiter walks away, and he looks at the card, and handwritten on it is the phrase, "I missed my bet." And he flipped the card over, and it was the name of that producer from the new talent program that had called Harry into his office and said, "You're never going to make it in Hollywood and you're fired." It was that guy, and he had apparently sent the waiter over to make amends because he was eating lunch in the same restaurant. And so Harrison would later say in interviews that at the time he got this card, and to this day that he was doing this interview, he said it gave him immense pleasure that when he looked up from this business card and he understood the situation, he knows this guy's in the room somewhere, as he looked around the room, he couldn't recognize the guy because he didn't know what he looked like. He was a nobody. And so instead of wasting any more time looking for this producer, he just looked at the card, chucked it, and went back to eating his lunch. There is one person in history whose name is so tied to horror that in many ways it's become sort of synonymous with evil. This person committed some of the world's worst atrocities. And in fact, they could have committed many more that we don't even know about. And part of the reason we don't know about it is because they got away with it. And even worse, they never came out and said why they did anything. There's no motive, there's no manifesto, there's virtually no communication with authorities or the public or anything. However, there is one time that this killer, for whatever reason, did reach out and communicate with somebody. And this interaction is simply known as From Hell. On the evening of October 12th, 1888, a 49-year-old businessman named George Lusk walked into his upscale home in East London. He grabbed the mail that his housekeeper had set out on the table by the door, and he began sifting through it. And at first, all he saw were a couple letters from friends, and he saw a couple of invitations to upcoming parties. And then he got to the bottom of the mail pile, and he stopped, because at the bottom of the mail pile, there was a postcard and a letter. Over the past 2 months, 4 people had been killed in George's neighborhood. And in fact, the most recent victim was a middle-aged woman who had been killed about 2 weeks ago, really not far from George's home. And on this mail, on these 2 pieces of mail, the return address was the name of this uncaught serial killer. George was so scared of this killer, as he should be, that he had formed this neighborhood watch group to go out and try to catch this killer. And in fact, just recently, when George was just looking out his front window onto the road, just kind of looking around, not part of his neighborhood watch group, but just kind of scanning the area, he had seen this kind of sketchy looking guy with a big thick beard standing on the other side of the road, and he was kind of in this alleyway. And this guy, it looked like he was staring right at George, very intently so. And George at first returned the stare, but then felt so uncomfortable that he drew the blinds and kind of hid from his window. Because again, he's thinking, there is a killer on the loose, maybe that's him. George actually had been so scared at seeing this guy that he had actually gone to the police and filed a report and said, "I don't know, I think that guy could have been the killer." But the police really couldn't do anything because all they had was a sort of generic description of some guy standing on the road not doing anything. So nothing was ever done. And so George, even though he was scared, he opened up these letters, and it was even more alarming than he could have thought. Because whoever wrote this, whether it was the killer or not, they were basically taunting George, saying, "Yeah, I know you stood up the neighborhood watch group. I don't care. I can do whatever I want. I can kill with impunity. In fact, I'm going to kill 2 people tomorrow night, and there's nothing you can do to stop me." George just gathered up the letter and the postcard. He left his house right away and literally ran to the police station. And when he got there, he showed them the letters and said, "Look, this is from the killer. It feels authentic. He's going to kill 2 people tomorrow night. You got to do something." And so the police, they took the letters and they read them, and they agreed that they did seem, authentic. But at the same time, they're like, there's really no way to tell if these are real. I mean, this could easily be a hoax. And even if this was real, what do we do? Who are the 2 people the killer's going to go after? How can we possibly protect them? George was told to go home and, just play it safe, stay home, stay inside, and let the police do their job. Over the next couple of days, George was basically sitting on pins and needles waiting to find out that, sure enough, a double homicide was committed somewhere in the neighborhood. But there was no news of any homicides. Things were calm. There was no news of the killer anywhere. And so George told himself that, you know what, he was overreacting. Clearly those letters he got must have been hoaxes. But then, on October 16th, so 4 days after George received those 2 pieces of mail from the killer, he came home and he went inside and, like normal, his housekeeper had set the mail on the table right inside the house. In addition to all the paper mail, stacked on top of it was this little package, and it was wrapped in brown paper. He picks up the box, and very apprehensively he begins to unwrap it. And once it opens up, he sees there's a letter sitting on top of this box. And the letter at the top, it says, "From hell." That middle-aged woman who had been murdered just a couple of weeks earlier right near George's house, well, when she was found, one, they identified that she clearly had been killed by the same serial killer that was still uncaught. But two, she was missing something, her kidney. The package that George received inside of that box itself included half of a kidney. And then the body of the letter explained that this was the other half of that woman's kidney because the killer had eaten the other half. And this half was a gift for George. The letters and the box containing that half of a kidney are considered to be potentially the only authentic communications from Jack the Ripper. In January of 1997, a very accomplished and Ivy League trained American chemist named Karen Wetterhahn started experiencing tingling in her lower extremities. Now, it was uncomfortable, but it wasn't enough discomfort to warrant going to a doctor or really being concerned about it. She figured it was just something kind of minor and it would go away on its own. But shortly after this tingling began, Karen started noticing she was having balance issues. She would be walking down the hallway at the university where she worked when inexplicably she would just lose her balance and start stumbling and would either fall to the ground or would have to lean up against the wall to steady herself. She tried to convince herself that she was just being clumsy or that she was just really tired and that's what was causing it. But shortly after these balance issues presented themselves, Karen was hit with a host of other health issues. Her speech became awkwardly slow and slurred. She began hearing this white noise ringing in her ear that just wouldn't go away. And her field of vision drastically narrowed to the point where it was like she was looking through 2 toilet paper rolls. Karen's husband brought her to the hospital where she underwent this very lengthy and involved examination, which involved spinal taps and brain scans to try to figure out what was going on because at first, none of the doctors had any idea. After the testing was complete and Karen was sleeping in a hospital bed and her husband was sitting by her side, a doctor walked into the room with a clipboard and he had this odd look on his face, like the news he was about to deliver he didn't really even understand. And so he consulted his clipboard one more time, looking at some paperwork, and then he looked up and he looked at Karen, and then he turned to Karen's husband, and he just says to him, "Sir, does your wife have any enemies?" It would turn out Karen was suffering from a severe case of mercury toxicity. Mercury is a naturally occurring metallic element that is poisonous to humans in all its forms. And Karen had so much mercury in her body, in fact she had 80 times the toxic threshold, that doctors believed this had to have been an intentional poisoning, that someone must have attacked Karen trying to kill her with mercury. But Karen's husband said, "You know, I don't think my wife has any enemies." And then when Karen ultimately woke up, she reiterated that sentiment, that she did not have any enemies. The doctors, who knew Karen was a chemist, they asked her, you know, "Have you had any recent exposure to mercury?" And through slurred and difficult to understand speech, Karen would say that she had. In fact, over the last 6 months leading up to this hospital visit, Karen had had lots of exposure to mercury because she was actually in charge of this huge $7 million research project that was looking to investigate the effects certain metals had on human health. And one of the metals she was studying was mercury. But Karen assured the doctor that anytime she handled any of these metals, she was always very, very cautious, especially when she handled mercury because she understood how hazardous it was. She said she always wore the proper protective equipment to make sure none of the substances made contact with her skin, and she worked under this big chemical hood, which is like a big vacuum, to ensure she didn't accidentally inhale any of the toxic fumes that came off of these metals. The doctor was totally stumped and went silent for a second, and then Karen at some point broke the silence by saying, well, you know, there was one time I did have a spill with mercury, but it was totally meaningless, and I haven't thought about it until just now, only because we're trying to figure out what happened. She would go on to tell the doctor about an incident that occurred 5 months earlier. She had been working at her lab at the university where she was employed when she accidentally spilled 1 or 2 tiny droplets of mercury onto the top of her left hand near her thumb. Now, she was wearing all of the prescribed protective equipment, including latex gloves on her hand, and so when she saw these droplets on her hand, she wasn't concerned for her health. She just followed procedure. She stopped what she was doing, she wiped the droplets off, and then she left her workstation, she threw away the contaminated gloves, she thoroughly washed her hands, and then put new gloves on, and then just went back to work and didn't think much of it. The type of mercury that Karen had spilled on her hand was called dimethyl mercury. This is not the same thing as the shiny silver liquid we see in old thermometers. That is a hazardous substance, but it's nothing compared to dimethyl mercury. Dimethyl mercury is a clear liquid that is considered to be one of the most toxic substances on the planet. After hearing this story from Karen, the doctor agreed that overall this did seem like a kind of meaningless event because she had followed all the proper procedures and those droplets had landed on her gloves, not on her skin. But since they had no other leads to operate on, he thought it would still be a good idea to test to see if dimethyl mercury could penetrate through latex. And sure enough, after they ran some studies, they found it could. In fact, the latex gloves that all these scientists were told to wear when handling this particular substance, they did nothing. The dimethyl mercury would penetrate through the latex in seconds. But even though they had just solved the mystery of how Karen got mercury toxicity in the first place, what no one could understand was why Karen was still suffering from the effects of mercury toxicity if her only exposure to it was 5 months earlier, just that one time. Typically, people who have mercury toxicity, they will get better as soon as the source of their toxicity is removed. Meaning, when the mercury goes away, they get better. And it's because the mercury kind of pools in their bloodstream and their body will naturally excrete it and they'll get better. But unfortunately for Karen, it would turn out dimethyl mercury is a little bit different. It's far more lipophilic than other types of mercury. Lipophilic means a chemical substance is more likely to bind and mix with fat tissue in the body. And since blood is primarily made of water, when dimethyl mercury enters the body, it does not settle in the bloodstream. Instead, it settles in organs that are made up of primarily fat. And once dimethyl mercury is in your organs, it takes an exponentially longer amount of time for your body to excrete it, if it ever does. Sometimes you just die from the effects of mercury toxicity before your body can get rid of it. And in Karen's case, when she showed up to the hospital, it was already too late. Some of the dimethyl mercury had already made its way up to her brain, which is an organ made up of 60% fat, and there it began to destroy her central nervous system. 3 weeks after being admitted to the hospital, Karen fell into a coma, and then shortly after, one of Karen's friends was in the hospital visiting her, and she saw a tear was coming down Karen's face. And so the friend turned to the doctor and said, is she in pain? Is that why she's crying? And the doctor said, no, it doesn't appear her brain is able to register pain anymore. Karen would unfortunately never wake up from her coma. She would pass away on June 8th, 1997, roughly 10 months after those little droplets of dimethyl mercury landed on her latex glove.
So you've asked if I've seen a ghost in the property, and the only time I've seen something paranormal or a ghost was this time. I'd let the property for 12 months and I was moving my things back in, and just here, exactly where that curved door is, I was about to go down the stairs and I had a girlfriend behind me and we were slowly taking things up and down and so on and so forth, and she was in the hall and I had some cushions and there was this man just standing there in front of the door in a very, very black suit, and he was very, very pale, and he had a middle parting and this very greasy dark hair, and he looked at me dead in the eyes, dropped his head, sort of bowed his head, and then walked off to where the piano is, off to the side. And I didn't scream, I just shouted to my friend, there's a man. And she said, what do you mean there's a man? I said, there's a man, but I knew it wasn't somebody alive. It was somebody that looked like almost funereal. Anyway, I got home and I thought, I've got to draw this person. I don't want to forget what this looks like. I'm not the best drawer, but I had to get pen to paper, and I've managed to get an image of the time, which is what I drew, with this sort of curtained hair and this sallow face and this black outfit. And then I thought, what period is this from? So I started Googling curtained hair, centre partings, and I looked at Edwardian men's hairstyles, and this was it. All I can assume is this is somebody from the house from an Edwardian time in the past.
Okay, so let's find out who this is. He's very tall, and so he's hunched over a bit, and his demeanor is very somber, and so it gives off this sense of sadness, but he's also saying that's just sort of how they are, or they were, just pretty quiet and non-emotional. But he didn't have children, but he did have a partner, and his partner passed. They both lived in this home together their whole lives, but his partner was a secret, and his partner did pass before him. And so this is where there is some heaviness and some sadness, and why he won't leave there, because it connects him to his partner. And it was a hard life because there was so much secrecy, but it was also a good life, he says. He doesn't want to leave. He says, it's my home. Why would I leave? And I'm telling him, but what if we could connect you with your partner again? His partner's name starts with an S, like a Sean or something. It's not Sean, but it's an S. And so I'm calling in his partner to see if he'll want to go. Not because he has to. Obviously, the woman that owns this home is very kind and allowing him to be, but he doesn't feel happy. And he's staying there because he's connecting home to his love, to his partner. So I'll just bring in his partner, and then he gets to choose if he wants to stay or go. Oh, that was strange. There was there were no words exchanged. He just held out his hand like this. And it wasn't like a big dramatic thing. He didn't even his partner didn't even turn all the way around to look at him. He just put out his hand like this, sort of like, come on, where have you been? And they just left. Oh my God, it's going to make me cry. It was so sweet. It's hard, because these beings sometimes, just like when we're in body, we just aren't ready to let go. It's really hard to let go, right? And that can happen in the afterlife, where it's just really hard to let go. When something is really good. And I don't mean it was necessarily easy, but it was good between them. And sometimes we just aren't ready to let go of that. And we do that in body, right? We all do that. And sometimes, more often than not, especially in body, it just requires someone in the outside, friend, therapist, sometimes even a stranger, to just say, hey, there's something else, whatever that something else is, And the afterlife is just the same. We're all just waiting to be ready for that next thing. And it's anyone can be the one, anyone can point us in that direction to that next thing. Anyone. You don't have to know the person. It can just be anybody. And again, that happens to us in body, right? Sometimes we get messages by watching TV or listening to a song, and all of a sudden you feel like you've been guided or something has opened up for you. That's the same thing. I think it's beautiful how clear this woman was able to see him, to draw him. He was ready. He was ready for change. That's why he was ready to be seen. whether he realized it or not not consciously because he was a spirit, but whether he realized it or not, he was ready for change. So that was a really nice story and a nice interaction and a happy ending.
You can't make this stuff up. Might have known the story of real life boogeyman.
What's good, mama? Hey, how you doing, man?
Yeah, how y'all doing?
Nothing much. Okay, so I got a couple questions that people have been asking, and put them together, and I'm gonna ask these questions for the viewers, and they can ask their own questions in the comment section, and we'll try our best to answer them in the next questionnaire or whatever. But I want to know, how old were you when you first noticed your gift of seeing like spirits and ghosts and stuff?
Well, I'm gonna have to say I was 5.
Okay.
When I think I was younger than that. I think I was 3 because, like I said, I followed my father down to one of his friends' house that night, and I fell in a big old hole. That's when I was like 3 years old, but my recognition only came through when I was 5. When I started, old lady used to come to the foot of my bed and say, "Get up out my bed."
Ooh, that story was crazy.
That was when I first, experiencing.
So he was like
my gift.
5 years old. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. Okay. So did anyone else in your family have similar abilities, or was you the only one with the abilities that you have? I know I got certain abilities, that I got, but that's another story for another video.
To be honest, I think all my siblings I think all of them got the gift, but I think I got the strongest gift out of all of them because I'm the only one that used to always see a lot of ghosts and stuff.
You the only one, none of my aunties, like your sisters, none like that. Besides, did my grandma and grandpa, did they have?
Oh yeah, my mom and dad, they had the gifts.
They was able to see spirits and stuff too.
Yeah, they could see spirits.
So you think that they passed? Do you think they passed that trait down to you?
I know they passed on down to me. I'm the one with the strongest,
Yeah.
With the strongest gift. I remember one night my mom had went to the store, and she was on her way back home, and she said she had. It might have been around about 8 or 9 o'clock, and she was on her way back home, and she said she was walking, and she said she looked back, and she could see this old lady. It was an old white lady, and she had a bonnet on, and she had dressed back in the cowboy days. She had this old long dress on, and she had a walking stick in her hand. And my mama said when she looked back, she started just walking, just behind her. And my mama said she started walking fast. The faster she started walking fast, the faster the old lady would start walking fast. And mama said then she was running. She said she was running, and I guess she must have flipped over something. She fell. Mama said she squared her arm and her legs up. And mama said, and when she got herself up and when she turned around, the old lady was right there.
Right in front of her face?
Right behind her, right there, behind. She looked up, she got up, and she took off to running.
And was the old lady, was she black too?
No, the old lady was white. She was an old white lady with a bonnet on.
What? Do you think she was
trying
trying?
An apron and an old dress.
Yeah. Do you think she probably was trying to tell her something or trying to get help from her or something?
I don't know. I know my mama said she was running so fast she made it home. Her heart beat so fast.
That's crazy.
Because she said she know that she wasn't, the lady wasn't alive and stuff. She knows she was a ghost and stuff.
Right. Okay. Have you ever seen a spirit and done some research to learn more about the spirit and who they was and who they were? Aside from the videos that you told, aside from the stories that you told in the past?
No, I never did that. The only time that happened was, when I told you that my mom had sent me over to this man, over to this people's house that stayed next door, and I would see this man called Mr. Ethan. Mama sent me over to get some sugar, and I would see this white man. It was like a black family stayed on side of us, and Mr. Ethan was white, And I would see Mr. Ethan outside, you know, like he'd be trimming the bushes, and I would see him in the back, and so that day when I went over to their house, I ain't gonna call their name, but when I went over to their house, I knocked on the door, and Mr. Ethan answered the door. And because I thought he lived there with them, and so when he opened the door, and I said, yeah, because he told me the name and everything. I said, Mr. Ethan, my mama said, could she have a cup of sugar? I came on in the house, let me in the house. The man gave me the sugar in a cup. And by the time I was getting ready to go back out the front door, I see the people that stayed there. It was a man and a woman, but they were black family. And they had 2 boys. And when I was going out the door, they was coming in with the bag of groceries and stuff. And they looked at me and they said, how you get in my house? I said, Mr. Ethan let me in, Mr. Ethan. And they said, so her husband said, baby, who's Mr. Ethan? I said, Mr. Ethan, the man that stay here with y'all. I see him every day, trimming the bushes and out there, doing the lawn and stuff. And so her daddy, the woman husband said, yeah, bring stuff in the house. So he told me, he said, don't Mr. Ethan stay here. Took me home, told my mama that they caught me in the house. And mama said, yeah, I still know to get some sugar. And I said, yeah, but Mr. Ethan stayed here. He gave me the sugar. I didn't get it myself.
He gave you the sugar too?
He put the sugar in the cup. And
wow.
So, mama said, who is Mr. Ethan? I said, the man that lived with them. And so the daddy said, baby, don't no white man stay with us.
Oh my God.
And so, like I said, you asked me about the history, and I looked it up. And so, the man and his wife that lived there, they looked it up, and they said that it was a white man that stayed there back in the 30s, I think, back in the 1930s and 20s or 30s. And yeah, he died. They found him on the kitchen floor. He had died.
Oh wow, that is crazy. So, okay, so let me ask. So when you see these spirits, right? Do you think they want to communicate something to you, or is they like asking? Do you think they asking you for something, or do you think they just there, they just pop up?
I don't know. I think they might want me to help them to move over, probably help me to find whoever harmed them. I don't know.
Like Passover or something?
Passover or something like that. But all I know is when I was younger, my mama had went to the psychic lady. And the psychic lady told my mom that the reason I stayed sick so much, I stayed, had colds and stuff all the time, stayed sick, that I was infested with ghosts. I was infested with a lot of ghosts that would come around me. I don't know what they wanted me to do. They probably wanted me to help them, but I was, I'm young, and during that time I was scared too.
Right.
And I just stayed sick. I stayed sick all the time. 3 days out of the week I was sick.
It's this movie. I'm gonna show you too off camera. It's this movie about this. It was this person. He was able to see ghosts too, and then once he like fully had his gift, he like one day he woke up and like all the dead people was like surrounding his bed, like asking for help and stuff. But yeah, that's crazy. That's nuts. So when you see spirits, do they appear like the way that they look when they died, or like from their injuries and stuff, or do they look like regular people, as real as me and you?
They like regular people, just like I'm looking at you.
So like, say a person died like from getting shot in their head. When you see them, do you see their injuries too?
No, I don't see their injuries. I just see them. Okay. But the thing about it, when they appear to me, I just feel I get this eerie feeling. I know I can tell that they are there, and I can feel them when they coming.
So can you control when you see them, or do they just come out of nowhere? Like you just be talking like how many you is, and then do they just like appear, or do you
just be there? They just appear.
That's crazy.
It is. It's
okay. All right, Mama. Well, that's all the questions I got for you right now. But that's nuts. Thank you. I'm pretty sure the people going to appreciate that, because you may be helping people that watch these videos and stuff, and you know what I mean. But thank you, Mama.
But don't be afraid when you see them, though. I know some people's gonna be afraid, but ghosts is feeding to fear.
Mm-hmm.
So the most scarier that you are, that's the most powerful you giving them.
They buried my sister pregnant, but at midnight we hear cries of a baby. When we went out to check her grave, we saw something very chilling. Story time. My sister got married. Shortly after, she fell pregnant. Everyone was excited about the news. Her husband, the whole family, the whole village excited. But then, one day, they woke up to find her lifeless body out in the compound. They rushed to get the village doctor. He came to check and gave us the sad news. Everyone was sad because she was loved by the entire village. She has never ever offended anyone. So we all started to suspect what went on. The elders held a meeting and they said she must be buried before midnight. If not, something bad would happen to the village. They buried my sister behind our compound. But then, a week after, I woke up at midnight to faint cries of a baby. I checked outside. I didn't see anything. I went back inside, but the cry started coming closer and closer. The next day, when we woke up, we saw footprints of a baby covered in blood. When we followed the trail, it led to my sister's grave. They dug the grave, and guess what? The pregnant belly was gone. But then, we keep hearing the cry of this baby at midnight every day.
This may look like an ordinary class photo, but if you take a closer look, you might see someone that seems like they don't belong. And according to the students in this photo, that's because she wasn't actually there. Today I'm going to tell you one of the most haunting urban legends from the state of Texas. If you're new here, make sure to follow along, comment the state you want covered next, and the top comment will be the one I do in the next video. And if you want to hear more about the sightings connected to this legend, check out my videos for subscribers only. El Paso High School is the oldest operating high school in the city and was established back in 1916. The building's basement is a labyrinth with long, narrow hallways that have sealed off classrooms still perfectly preserved as they were a century ago, yet mysteriously abandoned with no clear explanation why. Another section of the basement was once used as a temporary morgue during the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, so it's no surprise that over the years, staff and students have reported eerie, unexplainable occurrences. When stories of the same woman dressed in white began to overlap, people started to wonder if they were all seeing the same apparition. Students have reported seeing her standing silently over the balcony. Some have claimed to see her reenact her tragic death, jumping from the balcony only to disappear before hitting the ground and disintegrating into a cloud of mist. These sightings became so frequent that many began connecting her to a tragic legend of a former student who is said to have jumped to her death from the balcony during a winter dance. And the stairway leading to this area of the school has reportedly been sealed off due to the frequency of these sightings. The school's principal once claimed that he watched a girl in a white dress rise up out of the fog from the top of the bleachers before walking out of the auditorium. The theater director once described entering the dark auditorium to grab something he'd forgotten. Halfway down the aisle, he got goosebumps and felt as if someone were watching him. When he turned around, he saw a woman in an old-fashioned dress sitting perfectly still in one of the seats. The 1985 yearbook photo is just one piece of photographic evidence proving her existence. Over the years, she's appeared in the background of multiple pictures, always seen standing in the window as if something is keeping her from leaving.
This is one of the most unusual ways a person has been found dead that was not labeled a murder. This is the unusual death of Albert Decker. Viewer discretion is advised. Albert Decker, who was born in 1905, would end up becoming a star on Broadway, and then he would become an actor for television and movies, doing a lot of character work. He then became a member of the California State Assembly as a Democrat. By the time this case happened, he is actually engaged to this actress here. Her name was Geraldine Saunders. She would go on to create The Love Boat. And on May 5th, 1968, she walked into their home and found something horrific. Her fiancé, 62-year-old Albert Decker, was dead in his bathtub. And it was very, very unusual. Albert was completely nude, and he was kneeling in the bathtub. He had a scarf wrapped around his eyes. He had a gag shoved in his mouth. His hands were handcuffed behind his back. He had a belt loosely around his neck, and then he had another belt that was around his waist, which was then attached to a rope, which was then used to tie up his ankles. The contraption around his neck was then thrown over the shower rod. It was so loose, though, that it wasn't really going to be enough to actually strangle him. He had a single hypodermic needle sticking out of each one of his arms. He had needle puncture wounds in his buttocks, but there was no drugs found in his system. And then in lipstick, he had several crude words written on his body. The word whip, the words make me suck, the word slave, the word sucker. There were suns basically drawn around his nipples to look like, a sunshine. And then a crude drawing of a vagina on his stomach. It was by far the strangest thing a person could ever walk into, and also incredibly traumatic. Ultimately, his cause of death would be listed as suffocation and constriction of the neck. From the get-go, it was labeled a suicide. They said he did this to himself. However, they would soon change that to cause of death being accidental due to autoerotic asphyxiation. They are saying he set himself up in this very bizarre manner and died. His fiancée said that can't be true. One, the way he was tied up so extravagantly and everything that was on his body, it didn't seem like some of those things was possible to do by himself. But the most damning thing is that there was $70,000 in cash that was stolen from the home. That was according to Geraldine. That wasn't unusual because apparently Albert Decker primarily wanted to be paid in cash for his work. He didn't really like using the banks. She also said that there was camera equipment that he had in the home that was no longer there. But the biggest detractor from any kind of foul play is that the bathroom door was locked with a chain from inside the bathroom, and there was no other way in or out. It is possible to lock a chain lock from outside the door. It has been done before, but it's not super common. And so Albert Decker's death has remained a Hollywood mystery ever since. There are many who believe that he did this to himself accidentally. Autoerotic asphyxiation is a thing. I mean, David Carradine died the same way. But then there are other aspects of allegedly missing money and allegedly missing camera equipment. And all of the intricacies of how his body was seemed kind of unusual for a person to be able to do that themselves. But is it possible? Yeah. The truth of the matter is really no one knows what happened that day. And this is one of those unusual deaths that may remain a mystery forever. A deputy is killed in the middle of nowhere, and the mystery would deepen when they find 2 more bodies. Hello, true crimers. This is the case of Deputy Jeff Mitchell. Viewer discretion is advised. Jeffrey Mitchell was born in May of 1968, and it sounded like he pretty much was born and raised and lived his entire life in California. Everyone said Jeff was the guy who was just always smiling no matter what. He was a friend to everybody, and he was someone who just gave the benefit of the doubt to everyone. He had served in the U.S. Air Force. He would then go on to attend California State University, where he got his teaching degree, and he had become a substitute teacher, and that's also how he met his wife. And they would go on to have a child together. Jeff would then become a sheriff's deputy for the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department in California, which takes us to the early morning hours of October 27th, 2006. Jeff Mitchell, who was doing his patrols, would find himself at the intersection of Dillard and Mice Roads off Highway 16, which is a very rural, very desolate, very middle of nowhere type of road. Deputy Mitchell then calls into dispatch saying he has spotted a white van with no plates. He would go on to tell them that there was one occupant that he could see, and he gave no indications that anything was wrong. 7 minutes goes by, and they hear a crackling of the radio, but they don't hear Jeff's voice. They try to reach out to him. They get no response. They call his radio a few more times. They also call his cell phone. Nothing. So the dispatcher radioed a code 3, and officers would begin to approach the area. Jeff's initial call to dispatch came in at 3:27 a.m. By 3:37 a.m., other deputies have now arrived at the scene. They find his vehicle, and near the rear bumper of his vehicle, they find Deputy Jeff Mitchell, and he had been shot. He was rushed to the nearest hospital, but by 4:45 a.m., he would be declared deceased at the hospital. Deputy Mitchell had been shot through his head with his own gun. The scene also indicated a very violent struggle had taken place. There was actually additional DNA found at the scene that was not Jeff's. Also not at the scene was the white van he called in. So it becomes all hands on deck to find this white van. They put all over the freeways the signs, officer shot, white Chevy van, no plate. For the next 12 hours or so, they are searching diligently for this van. And finally, it's found. In the Casumas River, which would be about a 27-minute drive from where Jeff Mitchell was shot, they found a white van partially submerged in the river. They thought, great, we now have something, tangible something, to find out who did this. But instead, the mystery only deepened. Because in the van were 2 more bodies. One of the individuals found in the van was the registered owner of this van. But here's what makes matters even stranger. The autopsy for both of them showed they died of carbon monoxide poisoning. And they were dead, more than likely, before Deputy Mitchell ever came across the van at all. The bodies were identified as 43-year-old Alan Schubert and his 28-year-old friend, Nicole Welch. The detectives investigating this case, pretty much from the get-go, said that they had nothing to do with Deputy Mitchell's murder. Because again, in all likelihood, it appeared they had been deceased before the event even took place. So who was the one person that Deputy Mitchell said he saw then? Because if it wasn't them, if they were like laying on the floor of the van, the person he saw must have been the person who ended up shooting him after getting into a major struggle. I cannot find any mention of there being dash cam footage. I have to imagine they don't have any footage because they're not saying anything about a description of the person who did this. I have to imagine if they had dash cam footage, that information would have been told to the public because they want to find this person. But they do know that the person who shot and killed him was not the owner of the van. So did Jeff's killer also kill the 2 friends in the van and then steal the van? And then what brought them out to that road? Why was it already pulled off to the side of the road? Because also when they searched the area, they didn't see any indications of any other evidence left behind. There was, I guess, some white paint chips found that might have indicated that the van scraped along something. But it was technically, it sounds like, in working order when they found the van. Now, Alan Schubert was known to the law. He had a criminal history. Vandalism charges, DUI charges, and drug possession. He was rumored to be in the drug world. So is that related to all of this? What they pretty much do know is that Deputy Jeff Mitchell was not a part of whatever was going on with them. He literally was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But also he was doing his job. It sounds like he probably came up on something and saw something he was not supposed to see. Perhaps he saw those bodies, and that led to the struggle, which then led to his death. In the years since, the sheriff's department and detectives have investigated numerous leads and tips. They have searched certain individuals' home more than once. They have stated that they have persons of interest and potential suspects, but they have never been named. They've even stated that some of their persons of interest and suspects have still not been ruled out. They're also not 100% sure that these 2 were murdered. There is speculation that perhaps maybe one of them was murdered, like, her, and then he ended his own life the same way with carbon monoxide poisoning. It seems a little far-fetched, but they just don't know. They don't know. In all likelihood, though, is that they have 3 murder victims here, and they are still really no closer to being able to solve this. They have stated pretty emphatically that this is not a cold case, it's just unsolved. But they have been working on this diligently ever since. Someone, somewhere out there, has got to know the truth about who shot and killed Deputy Jeff Mitchell, husband and father, and also the same person who killed these 2 individuals. If you have any information on this case, you are asked to contact the Sheriff's Department at 916-874-8477.
3 14-year-olds were having a little sleepover, at one of the homes in Hartford, and they decided they wanted to go meet up with this one man, but he was a grown man, late at night. And this was back in May. When that happened, they went missing, and they wasn't found until November of 2025 by both of the aunts. I don't know who the aunts were related to or if they were related to all three of the girls. I just know that the aunts and the neighbor that was in the area teamed up together and found the girls. The one dude took them to a home where there was 7 men in the home, you know, waiting for them to start doing the little human trafficking thing that they had going on. And the girl said that often they would get them wasted, like give them Don Julio, give them marijuana, give them a whole bunch of stuff to get them wasted so that the clientele could have 5 minutes to do whatever they wanted to do with them. They also said that the 3 girls were like trafficked from different homes in the Hartford area. And the reason that they got caught is because one of the neighbors that lived in the area seen that the aunts were looking for the 3 girls and noticed them walking into a home in the area. So they called the aunts. The aunts went with them to like bust into the home. They seen everything. They called the cops, and that's how everything got busted. So all 7 men are in custody right now, but they don't have like the clientele that was like going in for the little human trafficking shit. So they're still doing an investigation, but the 3 girls are safe. Like, y'all cannot be doing this. It's not safe out here. It's not cute. Nothing about that is cute. I'm not saying it's their fault. I'm just saying, like, y'all gotta do better. Even the parents have to do better. I forgot to add this part, but these are the 7 men that have been arrested, and like I said, they're still investigating to try to find more of the people that was affiliated in the human trafficking.